You're listening to Yum Cha, a news podcast from Hong Kong Free Press, with me, Mercedes Hutton. This week, migrant workers and the children left behind, with Xyza Cruz Bacani. There are roughly 345,000 migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong. Arguably, their presence since the 70s has helped the city get rich by increasing the number of dual-income households and, in turn, the city's labour force. Employed to take care of children and elderly family members, clean, cook, and do so much more, domestic workers are denied the rights afforded to other economic migrants. They cannot live independently, get just one day off a week, have no pathway to permanent residency, and cannot change jobs at will. Domestic workers' rights advocates I've interviewed in the past have likened their treatment in the city to modern-day slavery. However, the minimum monthly salary of 4,730 Hong Kong dollars, or about $600 US, is still more than can be earned in most migrants' home countries, such as the Philippines or Indonesia. And this is why hundreds of thousands of women, in Hong Kong 98% of domestic workers are women, have moved overseas in the hope of providing a better life for their families back home. But, as photographer and artist Xyza Cruz Bacani points out, material benefits do not make up for a childhood spent without a mother. Xyza knows this firsthand. Her mum left the Philippines for a job overseas when Xyza was just a child, and she later worked alongside her mother for almost a decade in Hong Kong. Back in the city to promote an exhibition of her photography, and to discuss a report published by NGO Pathfinders Hong Kong and the University of Hong Kong about the need to protect children affected by migration. Xyza sat down with me for a conversation that spanned pandemic losses and painting, as well as her unique perspective living and documenting the migrant experience. Slight side note, we recorded this episode in Xyza's hotel room, which had an aggressive central air conditioning system, so apologies for the persistent hum in the background.
I'm here to talk about children who were left behind, like me, because I'm one of many. And I'm here for the exhibition and for the launch of the Pathfinders report. So basically, I'm here with Pathfinders.
Because I think the report is really interesting, actually, because it focuses on the impact of migration on those left behind, which is really not part of the conversation.
And it should
normally. No, of course it should be. Yeah, it's you think about the economic benefits, but you don't think about the
social.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually the main point that we're driving is we have to include children in conversations of migration, because most mothers migrate because of their children.
Of course, yeah.
Because they want to give an economic stability for their children. Because in an ideal world, no mother should be separated from their children, ever.
Yeah, right.
Except if it's an evil mother abusing the child, we should separate them.
Yeah.
But we're in reality, so I feel that it's important to start this conversation. It's important to offer this. It's more like an offering. It's not like a blanket solution.
No.
It needs to. It's actually starting conversations, which is like a good start.
It's a starting point.
Yeah, it's a starting point, and I hope that we can continue the conversation.
After growing up without her mother in Bambang, an inland municipality roughly 250 kilometres north of Manila, on the island of Luzon in the Philippines, Xyza travelled to Hong Kong to join her mum at work in the home of her employer, Mrs. Louis. And although now based in New York, Xyza says she still thinks of Hong Kong as one of her homes.
I arrived in Hong Kong year 2006. 2006. I just turned 19 that time. Yeah, I came here to follow my mother, who's also a domestic worker. So I'm a second generation domestic worker. Yeah.
And had you been to Hong Kong before coming here?
No, that was my first time leaving our town.
Oh, really?
And I was Hong Kong.
Goodness.
It was like...
How did that feel?
It feels amazing.
Yeah, right.
Like the first time I touched down Hong Kong, I sensed the kinetic energy.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated with the light, the buildings, how fast it is. I had a a good time arriving in Hong Kong. I wasn't like, I mean, I was 19, so it was an adventure, you know. I didn't know what's gonna happen to me, but at that moment I was like, oh my god, this city is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember the smell. When I arrived at Mrs. Louis' home, I smelled the laundry detergent. I love that smell.
Really?
Yeah, because my room is near the laundry room. So when I arrived, that's the first area that we went to, and I smelled it. I'm like, oh my god, that smells so good. So yeah.
And does that smell still resonate with you?
Oh hell yeah! Like I love it. It's almost like a warm hug every time.
That's so nice.
I have this love for this city that I don't even know, you know, where it's coming from. But I kind of know because my formative years is developed here.
Yeah.
So everything is like almost a muscle memory. I was telling you a while ago that the moment I touched down, my Cantonese came back, my movement came back. I was holding my phone, but I was not even like bumping to any people. Like it's like almost a muscle reflex. And then the food is good too. Like, oh, I love Hong Kong food. So I have this really, as I grew up, my relationship with the city have changed, but I have that love for Hong Kong that, you know, I considered it my second home because half of my family was here. Is here.
Yeah.
So for me, there's a special connection that binds me to the city. Like, it hasn't changed despite being away for 4 years, you know, like,
that doesn't go away.
Yeah, it doesn't go away. There's relationships here that has started years back, you know, like, you know, everyone in our building, the doorman, the security guards, the cleaners, when I arrived, they were like, oh, like fun, Layla. It's almost like I just went away to eat. They were like, oh, you're back. You know, I love that, you know, like, like, that type of community that I have built through the years, it's something that I really cherish because, like, this one Sok, you know, like, I've seen every time I go home at nighttime, he's the doorman, and he knows a lot about me that my other friends don't even know. You know what I mean? Like, there was one time I went back home and I think I was a little bit drunk, and then I started telling him about my thing and my love life and all, and then the next morning when I saw him again, and he was like, "Are you okay now?" You know what I mean? Those types of community.
Yeah, these people, you share so much with them.
Yeah.
And of course, Hong Kong is where you kind of your career as a photographer kicked off.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, I was photographing the city really for my mom. I mean, it's a very interesting city. The light is beautiful. There's different shades of gray, black and white. Like, if you look at it, it's different shades of gray. So when you do a black and white photo, it really pops out. Yeah. And then it's the energies. You get, once you capture the energy in a frame, you can almost feel it jumping out to you. Yeah. So. But then during that time, I was actually photographing for my mom because my mom, you know, chose to work on her holiday to send more money to the Philippines, and she has not really experienced Hong Kong. So I thought through my photographs, at least she can see it. That's why I go to like different places back then, and that's when, you know, and then I posted on Facebook. And then someone, you know, a journalist in San Francisco saw it, sent it to New York Times. New York Times liked it, and then it's like a roller coaster from then, you know. I don't know. I didn't ask for it, but I think the universe
put it out there.
You know, like, I was happy. I was happy with my mom, Mrs. Louis. I was happy with my little world, you know. So I didn't be like, oh.
You weren't doing that to kind of further anything.
Yeah, I was like, I was just happy to do photos. So as I've said, it's something that the universe decided for me. I didn't make a decision of it, you know.
Xyza's photography is striking. She is known for her black and white images that immortalize intimate human moments, revealing the strength and vulnerability of those impacted by economic migration, human trafficking, and climate change. She has reported on women lured overseas by the promise of a job, who later find themselves subject to indentured servitude. She has turned her lens on Indigenous Indonesians working on the very palm plantations that have displaced them. And she has photographed Hong Kong's migrant domestic workers, capturing tales of joy, abuse, and the breadth of emotions in between, including the story of her own mother, whose life, like Xyza's, has been reshaped by migration.
And your mother, she still works for the same family?
Yes, she still works for Mrs. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's been here for 26 years now. I'm not sure about the year, but
yeah,
20, let's say 25 year plus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have a very special relationship. Same as me and Mrs. Louis, you know. Like, good relationship. Like, we treat each other with, I don't know, it's almost like a friendship that you can't let go just like that, you know. Like, I was really worried about them during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then I'm worried about my father. It's like worrying because
around the world.
Yeah, that's the thing when you're mobile, right?
Yeah.
Like you leave pieces of your heart everywhere you go. And so when friends are dying,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like up to a point where I think I just had this realization, like, you know, last year around December, I was like thinking about the people I lost, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even sit down and take a moment to actually, because it's almost like one by one, you know, like one from New York, one from home. So it's you know, it's such a horrible feeling, you know.
Especially not being able to connect physically with those people at that time.
We didn't even have time to say goodbye.
No.
There's no goodbyes, you know. That was the hardest part.
And where were you during the pandemic?
I was in the Philippines, actually.
Okay.
I was documenting a lot of issues about the pandemic, like nurses who were going on the field, risking their lives
Mm-hmm.
without masks. I also did stories about pregnancy, about motherhood. I covered it for the NPR. It's about home birth in the Philippines. Yes, and then I did a lot of work in the Philippines, actually. It's almost like rediscovering my childhood and the town that I grew up with. And I was very grateful that the international community, you know, allowed these stories to be seen, because during the pandemic it was really centered on the cities, right?
Yeah.
And I live 8 hours from Manila.
Okay.
So I was really in a hometown. Like it's far from the main city. Like the nearest airport is 8 hours away. So not really 6 now, but I don't know.
It's still a while.
It's still a while.
Yeah.
So when I did these stories in our hometown, I was published in international publications. I was like really grateful about it, because it kind of alleviate a lot of the pandemic anxiety on my part.
Yeah.
I was like, because it was a worrying time for a lot of like creatives, because we can't go out, right? And my work is very relational. Like I have to go out there, do my research, speak to people, and you can't do that during the pandemic.
Yeah, no, you're forced to separate.
Yeah, there's a distance. So I was able to do that. I did a lot of stories in the Philippines. And I also followed the doctor for National Geographic, and then she's the only doctor in her hometown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How big is your hometown?
56,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah,
and
she's
one doctor.
one community doctor.
Wow.
So that community doctor is serving 56,000 people.
Yeah.
And during the pandemic, she was actually the one who made it possible to, you know, like because of the way he did it, our town was one of the few towns that was spared in the beginning.
Right. Really?
Yeah, like there was no cases for 143 days, and that was like, and our town is like a town where everybody passed by.
Right.
So like if you want to go to the north, you have to go through our town. So you can't really stop people from, you know, you cannot control the number of people coming in, because we have the vegetable terminal, and and so for 143 days our town was zero COVID.
Wow.
And
I don't even think Hong Kong managed that with its like extreme stringent restrictions that were like top down.
It's because of the way he did it. Like, he had the group of nurses, right? Community nurses were basically, and through the collaboration with the village officials, it was like a fascinating system that they created.
Yeah.
Like, of course, there's less movement, but then, I mean, 143 days is amazing.
Yeah.
Of zero COVID that time.
Yeah.
So I published it with National Geographic. I also followed the movement of food. That was a good one. So from farmers land to the table, from the table, food insecurity kind of thing. So I did a lot during the pandemic until I got sick myself.
How long did it take for you to get COVID?
It was the later part, 2020. Oh no, 2021.
Okay.
Before I moved to the US, and it's not because of my work.
No.
My grandfather died, and of course, some of the restrictions lifted that time, and people gather for funerals.
Yeah.
And so that's when I got it. I was actually the last one in her family to get it, because I was busy taking care of everybody who got it. It was a terrible ordeal. But at least I was vaccinated at the time.
Yeah.
If not, I'll probably be dead. I was in the hospital for 12 days.
Really?
That's how
my
bad it
goodness.
is. Yeah. So after that, I came out of the hospital, and after 2 weeks, I flew to the US to start my grad school. And I'm like,
oh right,
yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, right. Is that the longest you've spent in the Philippines since leaving?
Yeah, it was actually the longest. So it was one of those things where it's like discovering your root, rediscovering it again. I saw it with an eye of a visitor. Yeah. And
as an adult.
As an adult too. So it's more like I realized how beautiful my hometown is. How green it is. Like, we have long rivers, greeneries, mountains, falls, majestic falls. The people are nice. So I learned how to drive, which is the biggest thing. Yep. So I was like reporting, right? And then I realized that because I can't drive and there was no other,
you couldn't get around.
I cannot get around because there's no public transportation. And I'm like, I'm gonna die of heat stroke first before COVID, because I'm like walking with the cameras in the heat, and I'm like, girl, you have to learn how to drive.
Take matters into your own hands.
So I did learn how to drive during the pandemic.
In 2017, Xyza was awarded a grant from Hong Kong-based non-profit WMA, with which she produced a book, We Are Like Air. Published the following year, in it, Xyza sought to reframe and humanize the migrant domestic worker experience.
So we are like air because migrant workers, for me, are like air. They're important, a necessity, but mostly unseen. They're unseen, like air. And We Are Like Air is a celebration of the migrant workers. It's celebrating them as champions, because they are the axis that carry both sides of migration. They're actually carrying their families and the families they serve. The families they left behind and the families they're serving. So both sides, right? Yeah. So it's a book. So it's trilingual.
Oh, okay.
So it's English, simplified Chinese, and Tagalog.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a photo novel. You have to start in the beginning.
Oh, you do. You can't just
skip it and go to the middle and like, what I mean? Like, it has to.
It tells a story
because it's a visual narrative and there's text with it that ties it all together. So it's 8 different chapters, 8 different stories, and the main anchor of the story is the story of my mother and our family. Yeah. So it's more like looking inwards rather than outwards, but then because it's 8 chapters, it covers a lot. So the book has it received a lot of it's good. I'm very glad about it. We Press published the book, and I'm very grateful for them because I did not. I can't self-publish.
Yeah.
I'm not rich. So
Yeah.
for them to see the story
Mhm.
and invest on it, and of course WMA, they're the ones who gave me the grant to actually do it, and it's a book about migration, but not your typical story of migration where it's only focused on the survival, the hardships, or the challenges. It's also a celebration of migrant mothers, migrants.
Yeah.
Because we have to celebrate them.
Of course, yeah.
I was thinking about that. Like, it's always easy to celebrate people like me who broke the ceiling.
Yeah, right.
You know, like, but often we forget that in everyday lives we have these women that are working,
holding everything together.
Holding everything together. They're like glues.
Yeah.
And we have to celebrate them. For me, they're champions.
Yeah.
Like, they're not just victims. They're champions, you know. And their job is just a job. It's not who they are as people. They have their own hobbies. They have their own activities outside their jobs. They have their own hopes and dreams, anxiety, whatever. They're humans like us.
Yeah, yeah.
Recently, Xyza has taken up painting, a practice she says is good for her mental health. And in a departure from her monochrome photographs, her canvases are bursting with colour.
I use photography, it's my main medium, but I also paint.
Ah, okay,
And
I didn't realise that.
I also do multimedia. I just released my painting this year's paintings. I had like an exhibition in Texas. I got a solid show out of my paintings. I'm so proud of it.
When did you start doing that?
I love painting more than photography since I was a child.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because I don't know, it's my first exposure to art, to the art world, and so from the books, I devoured images of paintings.
Right.
But then with painting, I went back to it during the pandemic.
Okay.
Because my painting for me is my idea of self-care. I'm still very much introverted. In my photography practice, I do a lot of human stories, human interest stories, and of course, it's not always about sunshines and butterflies. And somehow, people like us absorb the secondhand trauma of reporting about these issues. So the reason why it was very colorful was I experienced panic attacks, and one of the things that really grounded me was identifying colors in my surroundings.
Okay,
like every time there's a trigger, and those triggers we cannot control, one thing that helped stop the attack is like I look around and like that's a red, that's a blue, that's a yellow, and it just grounds me. And it kind of like switched my brain into thinking that what you're experiencing is just a feeling. You're not gonna die. You'll be fine. Just keep looking at the colors, identify them. So it kind of like do this trick inside my brain. That's why I started painting more colorfully.
That was my conversation with photographer and artist Xyza Cruz Bacani. Thanks for listening. To check out any of her work, just search for her online. You've been listening to Yum Cha, a news podcast from Hong Kong Free Press. Written, produced and edited by me, Mercedes Hutton. HKFP is a member of the Trust Project. Find out all about our journalistic standards by visiting hongkongfp.com/ethics. And for more informative and impartial coverage, and to learn how to support our journalist-led newsroom, visit hongkongfp.com.